Far away in the future, long after Earth had reached the stars, humanity lived among many worlds, spreading cities and colonies across the galaxy. They were no longer alone, because other civilizations lived in the dark of space, some friendly, some cruel, some simply watching. Humans were young compared to the ancient empires, but they carried something that others did not. They carried fire in their hearts. Among them was a young general, a girl not much older than her soldiers, but her eyes were sharp, and her voice carried strength. She had risen faster than anyone expected, for her mind was clear, and her courage was unshaken. Some said she was too young to lead. Others whispered that she had been chosen by fate. When she walked through the command halls, even the veterans stood straighter, because she reminded them of why they fought. Peace, they thought, was finally possible. For years, humanity had been at the edge of war with alien powers, battles on border worlds, ships lost in the cold, soldiers buried under alien skies. Now, for the first time, hope appeared. A treaty was close. The High Council prepared speeches, and the generals prepared to lower their weapons. The young general wanted to believe in peace. She wanted her people to live without fear. Children laughing in colonies, not hiding in shelters, but deep inside her, doubt lived. She had seen too many battles, too many sudden betrayals. The galaxy was not kind, and innocence was a fragile thing. One night, as she stood before the giant star map in her war room, she stared at the glowing lines of human space. Every point of light was a colony, a city, a home. She whispered to herself that she would protect them, no matter the cost. The next morning, news came. A colony at the edge of human space had gone silent. At first, the council said it was nothing. A broken relay, a failed power system. But then reports arrived. Ships passing the colony saw smoke in the skies. Entire cities burned. No signals, no survivors answering. The council chamber grew silent, eyes full of fear. It was not a broken relay. It was destruction. The general clenched her fists. Innocent lives had been lost. Men, women, children all gone. No warning, no demand, no chance to fight. The people of that colony had believed in peace. And in a single night, peace was torn away. She stood before her officers, her voice steady though her heart was heavy. She told them that humanity could not look away. They must discover the truth. Whispers spread among the soldiers. Some thought aliens had struck, old enemies waiting for the right time. Some thought it was the work of pirates, greedy for blood and power. But the general felt something more, something darker. The attack was too precise, too cold. Whoever had done this wanted not only destruction but also fear. Her eyes burned with quiet fire as she looked at the star map again. This was no accident. This was a message. She could not yet read it, but she knew the meaning was clear. Humanity's innocence had been shattered, and the galaxy was watching. Somewhere in the shadows, someone wanted a reckoning, and she knew it was only the beginning. The colony lay in ashes, its people silenced forever, and yet the High Council refused to act. They sat in their grand chamber, dressed in silks and metals, speaking in calm voices, as if calm could hide fear. They wanted the tragedy buried. They told themselves that silence would protect the fragile treaty with the alien empires. They said to accuse anyone without proof would only lead to war. The young general listened, her hands folded behind her back, her face expressionless, but inside her blood burned like fire. How could they speak of treaties when human lives had been taken without mercy? She watched their faces and saw not wisdom but fear. Fear of the aliens, fear of losing power, fear of the truth itself. They wanted peace at any price, even if the price was silence. Outside the chamber, whispers grew. Soldiers in the barracks spoke in low voices, wondering who had struck. Some were certain it was the Shirathi, an ancient empire of cold machines who despised human courage. Others believed it was the Veil, shapeshifters who hid lies inside every word they spoke. The rumors spread like fire across the fleets, and with each whisper the seed of doubt grew. Was humanity strong, or was humanity weak? The general walked among her soldiers, and though they saluted her with respect, she could see the question in their eyes. Would she follow the council's silence, or would she seek the truth? She looked at them, and said nothing, for her answer was not ready. But her silence told them she was thinking. That night, she sat alone in her command room. The star map glowed before her, every light a world that depended on her courage. She thought of the colony lost, the families erased in fire. She thought of the children who would never grow, their laughter forever stolen. Innocence had been murdered, and the galaxy was pretending not to see. Her mind told her to wait. Her heart told her to act, and she felt the weight of command pressing like iron on her shoulders. Then the message arrived, a private transmission hidden behind coded layers. It flickered onto her screen, broken, desperate, but alive. The face of a child appeared, a boy no more than 10, his eyes wide with terror, his voice shaking. He whispered that he had escaped the fires, that he had hidden beneath the ruins. He said they came at night, ships black as shadows, soldiers without mercy. And then he said something that froze her blood. They were not aliens. The boy's voice cracked. He said they looked human. They spoke in human tongues. They carried human weapons mixed with strange alien tools. He had seen their faces under the helmets. They were not strangers from the stars. They were men and women like her own people. Before he could say more, the signal broke, leaving only static and silence. The general sat frozen, her heart pounding. The truth was darker than she had feared. If the boy spoke truth, then humanity's greatest threat was not the alien outside, but the traitor within. Someone had betrayed their own kind. Someone had chosen fire over peace. She stood slowly, her fists trembling. The council would never believe this. They would bury it, deny it, silence it, but she could not. She could not allow the truth to die with one frightened child's voice. She knew the path ahead would be dangerous. Her enemies were not only beyond the stars, they were also hidden among her own people. The galaxy would soon learn that the price of innocence had just begun, and humanity would face a reckoning unlike any before. The secret message haunted her long after the screen went dark. The boy's frightened voice echoed in her mind. They were not aliens. They were human. The words struck like a blade, sharp and impossible to ignore. For days, she carried the memory in silence, unable to share it with the council. They would call it madness, they would call it a lie, and they would lock the truth away. But the general was not a woman who could sit in silence. She began to search quietly, sending trusted scouts into the ruins of the colony. Their ships moved under false orders, hidden among trade routes and patrol lines. Each scout returned with fragments of truth, strange burns that matched no alien weapon, bodies with wounds cut by human blades, symbols carved into walls in a language of Earth mixed with alien marks. None of it was proof enough, yet together the pieces whispered a story that grew darker each day. Among her soldiers the tension deepened. Rumors ran wild. Some believed the general had uncovered something but was keeping it from them. Others thought she had lost faith in the council. They were not wrong. For each time she stood before the council chamber, she saw their polished smiles and their careful words, and she knew they feared peace breaking more than they feared the enemy hiding in the dark. One night, as she sat alone with the boy's broken transmission replaying again and again, she received another signal. This one came from an unmarked ship drifting near the border. The message was a voice, older, calm, but heavy with secrets. The speaker never gave a name, only a warning. He said the colony's death was only the first. He said the same shadows would strike again, and then he spoke words that chilled her to the core. The enemy is already inside your walls. The general felt her chest tighten. She asked who he was, who he served, but the signal ended as quickly as it began, leaving only silence. She stared at the dead screen, her heart torn between doubt and belief. Was this man part of the faction that murdered the colony, or was he a desperate soul trying to save what remained of humanity? The following days brought more confusion. Ships began to vanish in deep space, not destroyed by alien fleets, but simply gone. Communication relays went dark. Patrols returned with tales of ghost ships watching from afar. Soldiers spoke of strange orders arriving from the council, commands that made no sense, routes that led fleets into traps. The general began to see a pattern. The traitors were not only in the shadows, they were touching the strings of power. In the mess halls, soldiers argued. Some still blamed the aliens, convinced the Shirathi or the Veil had found new tricks. Others whispered that humans had done this, and those whispers spread like poison. Trust began to crack. Brother looked at brother with suspicion. Comrade questioned comrade. The general walked among them, her presence calming some, but she could not hide the storm in her own mind. She stood again before the great star map, lights glowing across the galaxy, and for the first time she saw the stars differently. Each light was no longer only a home, it was a target. Each colony was a heartbeat waiting to be stopped by unseen hands. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and swore under her breath. She would not allow another world to burn in silence. The boy's words returned to her again, not aliens, human. She realized then that the greatest danger was not the attack itself but the secret. If humanity turned against itself while believing the lie of alien guilt, then every warship, every soldier, every colony could become a weapon pointed inward. The general knew her path was set. She could not trust the council. She could not wait for the truth to reveal itself. She would dig it out with her own hands. She would chase the shadows into the heart of darkness, and when she found them, she would make them answer for the cost of innocence. She lay awake in her quarters, the hum of the ship's engines steady beneath her feet, but her thoughts restless and sharp. The boy's face, pale and trembling, would not leave her mind. His words had carved themselves into her heart. Not aliens, human. The whispers of the mysterious voice returned again and again. The enemy is already inside your walls. Each memory pressed against her like a weight she could not shake. Once, she had believed in peace. She had walked into the council chamber with a smile and hope. She had told her soldiers that humanity could stand equal with the alien powers, that war was not the only future. But now, with the colony's ashes still warm and the truth twisting in her hands, she knew innocence was a fragile dream, and dreams shattered easily in the cold vacuum of space. Her officers came to her one by one. They wanted answers. They wanted to know what she had learned. Some begged her to speak openly. Others warned her to be silent. Their eyes showed fear, but also trust. They looked to her for guidance because they felt the council slipping away. She knew her words would decide more than their actions. They would decide whether they lived or died. She stood before them in the command hall, her voice steady. She told them what she believed without naming names. She said that humanity was not only threatened by alien fleets, but by shadows within their own people. She said that silence was as dangerous as the enemy's weapons, and that truth was their only shield. Her soldiers listened, their jaws tight, their hands clenched. Some nodded, others glanced at each other in worry, but all of them knew her words carried fire. Alone again, she stared at the star map. Her reflection glowed faintly on the glass. She saw not a general, but a girl still too young to carry such burdens. Yet she had no choice. Leadership was not a gift, it was a price. And she understood now that peace itself had a price too. The cost of innocence was written in the smoke of the colony, in the broken voice of the child, and in the silence of the council. That night, sleep finally took her, and she dreamed of Earth. She dreamed of the oceans and the forests she had left behind, of children running through the streets without fear. But in the dream, shadows crept over the skies, fire fell from above, and the laughter turned to screams. She awoke with sweat on her brow and a vow in her heart. She would not let the dream of Earth die in silence. Her chance came sooner than she expected. Scouts brought reports of strange signals near another colony. They were faint, scattered, like echoes of something trying to stay hidden. The council dismissed them as static, but the general felt her heart twist with dread. She knew the signs. She knew another attack was coming. She ordered her fleet to prepare, not openly, but carefully. Soldiers trained harder, ships readied their weapons, and her officers sharpened their eyes. She gave no speeches this time, only quiet commands. She was not only preparing for the enemy beyond the stars, she was preparing for the enemy within. In that moment, she understood her path clearly. Innocence was gone, peace was broken. She would carry the burden of truth. She would stand between the shadows and her people. Even if the council turned against her, she would fight, not for glory, not for treaties, but for the survival of humanity itself. And as the stars glittered outside the viewport, she whispered to herself, "If humanity must pay the price of innocence, then let me be the one to pay it first." The first signs of truth came not in a council chamber or on a battlefield, but in the silence of space. Patrol ships under the general's command intercepted a vessel drifting without beacon, a ship that should not have been there. Its hull carried no markings, its signal was false. When her soldiers boarded it, they found weapons stacked in rows, crates marked with human stamps, yet altered with alien tech fused into them. The soldiers looked at each other in silence, for they knew what this meant. The general walked through the dark corridors of the captured ship, her boots echoing on metal floors. Every crate she passed told the same story. These were human designs, altered but recognizable. Who could have done this but humans themselves? And not just scattered criminals or pirates, but someone with power, someone with reach. She touched the cold steel of the weapons and felt a chill that was not from the air. When she returned to her command hall, her officers surrounded her, their voices low and tense. They asked what this meant, who was responsible. She hesitated because the truth was heavy. To admit it was to say out loud that humanity was its own worst enemy, but she could not lie. She told them the weapons were human, modified with alien parts. The room grew still. Their faces changed from fear to anger to betrayal. Whispers spread quickly across the fleet. Soldiers who had fought believing they defended humanity now wondered if humanity itself had betrayed them. Some cursed the council, others cursed the nameless shadow that had struck the colony, but one truth cut through every whisper. The enemy was not only beyond the stars, the enemy was human. Days later, a coded message arrived. It was clearer than the child's desperate cry, clearer than the stranger's warning. This time it came as a declaration. A voice filled with pride and arrogance announced, "Itself." The voice said a new faction had risen, a faction born from humanity itself. They called themselves the Ascended, and they believed peace was weakness. They believed only endless war could make humanity strong. The general stood still as the message played across the hall. The voice boasted of the colony destroyed, saying it had been necessary, a sacrifice to awaken the rest of humanity. The voice promised more flames, more reckoning. They claimed the galaxy would bow to humanity's might, but only after humanity tore away its innocence and embraced the darkness of war. Her soldiers erupted with fury. Some shouted that they must strike at once. Others wept in disbelief. For years they had fought aliens, never once thinking they might fight their own kind. The general raised her hand and silence fell. Her voice was calm but hard. She told them this was not strength, it was madness. She told them humanity did not need to kill its children to survive. Humanity's true strength was its unity, its courage, its heart. But even as she spoke, she knew her words would be tested in fire. The council denied the message. They called it a trick by alien powers to divide humanity. They refused to believe, or perhaps they refused to admit. The general understood then that she stood alone. The Ascended were real, they were powerful, and the council's silence gave them room to grow. She stared once more at the star map. Each light now seemed like a candle flickering in a storm, threatened by shadows waiting to snuff it out. She clenched her fists and swore under her breath. If the Ascended wanted a reckoning, she would give them one, but it would not be the reckoning they dreamed of. She knew now that the war to come was not only against alien empires, it was against those who had forgotten what it meant to be human, against those who had twisted strength into cruelty. And, as the fleet around her stood ready, she whispered to herself, "The enemy is revealed, and humanity must choose what it will become." The days of waiting were over. The Ascended moved quickly, striking border colonies and patrol routes with precision. Their fleets appeared from nowhere, black ships built from human hands but twisted with alien steel. They attacked with cold discipline, leaving behind ruins and silence. Each message they sent carried the same words. Humanity must burn away its weakness. Humanity must be reforged in war. The young general watched these attacks unfold across the star map, her heart heavy with anger and sorrow. Every point of light that vanished was another home lost, another promise broken. She could no longer hold back her hand. She gathered her fleet, soldiers who trusted her more than the council, and prepared for war. She told them the truth, that humanity's enemy was not only alien, but human. She told them this would be the hardest battle of their lives, because they would be fighting their own blood. The soldiers did not flinch. Their faces were grim, their voices quiet, but their loyalty shone in their eyes. They had lost families, they had lost friends, and they were ready to fight. They did not fight for the council. They fought for each other, for the colonies still alive, for the dream of humanity's survival. The first clash came near a mining world on the edge of human space. The general's fleet dropped from faster-than-light travel to find the Ascended waiting. Rows of black ships gleamed against the stars, their weapons glowing with stolen alien fire. For a moment, the silence was endless. Two halves of humanity staring at each other across the void. Then the first shot tore through the darkness and the battle began. The void lit up with fire, beams of light carving across the black, missiles streaking through the emptiness. Fighters swarmed like insects, weaving between the massive cruisers. The general stood on her command deck, her voice steady as sea. He gave orders. Her fleet moved with precision. Her captains trusted her completely. Each maneuver was like a blade striking the enemy's weakness. But the Ascended fought with fury. They had no fear of death. Their ships slammed into her lines with reckless violence. Some even self-destructed to tear holes in her formations. Her officers cried out as ships were lost. Names whispered as comrades vanished into fire. Still, the fleet held. Then came the betrayal. A squadron of her own ships, marked with human flags, suddenly turned their weapons on their allies. Fire ripped across her flanks, tearing through her formations. Shock spread across the command deck. Soldiers shouted in rage and confusion. But the general's eyes grew cold. She understood in that instant. The Ascended were not only out there, they were inside her fleet, planted long ago, waiting for the moment to strike. She gave no cry of despair. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She commanded her loyal ships to break the traitors. She ordered her captains to close ranks, to fight harder, to remember what they stood for. And they did. With fury and pain, they struck back. Loyal crews fought against traitors in the same uniforms. Friends turned enemies in the blink of an eye. Hours passed in fire and blood. The mining world below was scarred, the stars above lit with wreckage. The general never left her command post. Her voice carried until her throat was raw. Her hands shook, but her eyes did not. When at last the Ascended began to retreat, leaving behind shattered wrecks and burning debris, she did not cheer. She only stared at the star map. Now marked with the dead, her fleet had survived, but the cost was heavy. Too many ships gone, too many lives burned away. The soldiers stood silent, victory empty in their mouths. The general lowered her head and whispered to herself, "This is the reckoning. Gee, they wanted, but it is humanity that pays the price." The battlefield was quiet now, silent except for the drifting wreckage of ships, fragments of metal glowing faintly as they burned in the cold void. The war was not finished, but for the first time, the Ascended had pulled back. They had tasted defeat, yet their message remained. They would return, stronger, and they would not stop until all of humanity bent to their twisted vision. The general stood at the center of her command deck, her face pale with exhaustion. Her soldiers looked at her with eyes heavy from battle, but still filled with trust. She had carried them through fire, but the victory felt hollow. The cost was everywhere. Empty chairs on the bridge, names missing from the roster, ships gone forever. She whispered each name in her heart, for they had paid the price of innocence with their blood. News reached her soon after. The council declared the battle a misunderstanding. They said rogue pirates had been responsible. They insisted that no true human faction would betray its own. The words were poison, empty and hollow. The general listened with cold silence. She knew the truth. She had seen the enemy with her own eyes, heard their voices, watched their cruelty. She knew the Ascended were real, and denial would only feed them. Her officers gathered in private. They begged her to speak out, to tell the people the truth. Some argued that humanity must hear the warning. Others feared that if she spoke, the council would brand her a traitor. The room was filled with anger and sorrow, but all of them turned to her in the end, waiting for her decision. The general stood, her voice low but steady. She told them the truth could not be hidden forever. She said humanity must face its reflection, must choose what it would become. The path was clear, but it was not easy. To fight the Ascended meant to fight their own blood, their own brothers and sisters. Yet to, remain silent, meant to let the shadows grow until they consumed everything. That night she walked alone through the observation deck. The stars glittered endlessly beyond the glass, each one a home, a dream, a story. She thought of the boy who had sent the first desperate message. She thought of the soldiers who had turned their guns on their comrades. She thought of the lives lost on the mining world. The galaxy seemed so vast, yet so fragile, and humanity's future balanced on the edge of her choice. In the silence, she whispered her vow. If humanity must lose its innocence, then let it lose it with honor. If humanity must fight itself, then let it fight for a future worth dying for. She would not allow the Ascended to define what it meant to be human. She would not let cruelty and fear shape their destiny. Humanity's strength was not war alone. It was the courage to protect, the will to endure, the heart to hope. When morning came, she called her officers. Her decision was made. They would not wait for the council. They would not hide in shadows. They would carry the truth to every colony, every fleet, every soldier. Humanity had to know what danger lived within. Only then could they rise against it. Her officers stood straighter, fire burning once more in their eyes. They had their cause. They had their leader. The galaxy would judge them. Some would call them rebels, others heroes. But the general no longer cared for names. What mattered was survival. What mattered was that humanity's soul remained unbroken. As her fleet turned toward the stars, she whispered her final words. This is the cost of innocence, and this is our reckoning. Humanity will endure, whatever the price.